Hey guys, before we start the episode, I just want to tell you to head over to thingspolicec.com if you'd like to be a guest on the show. Scroll down, click Be a Guest, fill out the short form, and I will get back to you expressly. Also on thingspolicec.com, you can also use our Amazon affiliate link. It doesn't cost you anything, but if you do your shopping through the website, the show will get a little kickback. And if you really love the show, you can click the donate button, and you can donate one time or monthly. Without further ado, here's the episode.
This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gould.
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast that interviews active and retired police officers about their most intense, bizarre, and humorous moments on the job. With me, as always, is Ken Roybal. Ken, how are you?
I'm good. I'm just having an outstanding day. This is going to be an amazing interview, by the way.
I'm excited. We had a hole in the schedule. Somebody couldn't come through and be interviewed, so Ken had the idea, why don't we interview you? And I said,
yeah.
Okay.
You want to introduce our guest?
Yeah, it's probably the handsomest guest and the most orange guest we've ever had.
The most redheaded guest we've ever had. Yeah, I was sitting around and I thought to myself, no one's ever interviewed Steve Gould, and perfect. We can do that because I have questions for you, Steve.
I've thought about doing it alone, but it didn't work out right. So I'm glad you mentioned it because I like to talk. This works.
I got some questions for you. I got some kind of questions that I thought about, and then I think we're just going to go ahead and just go with the flow and see where it takes us. But for the listeners, Steve and I have known each other for quite a bit now, and him and I just, when we talk on the phone, it's very conversational. Whatever comes up, we talk about, and I think that this is probably going to be the format that we're going to use. We're just going to shoot it back and forth and see what comes up. How about that?
Sounds good to me. I'm handing the reins over to you, Mr. Roybal.
All right. Even though I know a little bit about you, but I wanted to find out, it's the story of how you came to California, became a background investigator. That is an amazing feat that I don't think most people would take on. So you you were a cop in Massachusetts. You decided, you and your wife decided that you're going to pack up the kids in a motorhome, go cross country, have no job prospects, nothing, and you're just going to make your way out to LA. And tell me the whole, how that all came about, how it turned out. I know you were camping one time and got, just tell the story.
Okay. Yeah, it's a little bit crazy. We were a little bit crazy with what we did, but we talked about for a while. Carrie and I both grew up on Cape Cod, spent our whole lives on Cape Cod. I did go away to college, but I came back and started my career on Cape Cod, little peninsula that sticks out in the ocean there in Massachusetts, for those of you who aren't familiar. But we would talk for like a few years. We threw it back and forth. Like, wouldn't it be amazing to go live somewhere else? Like, you go on vacation sometimes and you fantasize, what would it be like to live here? Well, we kept talking about that. We visited California. We visited a friend in LA. We liked it. And we just, every night it seemed like we were on the couch, kids were asleep, and we would talk about it. And then the conversation would end with, that's insane. We're not going to do that. I have a good job. I've been on the job 10 years, 4 years before that as a natural resource officer. I had a good retirement, healthcare. Everything was perfect, but this itch wouldn't leave us. And thankfully it worked out because we both had the same feeling. So eventually we kind of just decided we're going to do this. There's no way that two able-bodied people like us, of relative intelligence, I'm on the lower end, Carrie's very smart, but, two of us combined make an average. And, we thought, why couldn't we, if we, had enough money saved up, rented our house, and just drove cross country with the ultimate destination being California, but just kind of meander across the country, experiencing things, spending our life savings with our kids, and then setting up shop here in LA County. I had a good resume, college degree. Why couldn't I get a job to support us? That was kind of how we were thinking. And at some point during that, I was able to get rid of the immense amount of fear that comes with doing something like this. The people around us were not, it was difficult because they didn't want us to go, especially family. They thought we got ourselves into a headspace where it made sense, but no one around us really was sharing that with us. They thought tough, man. Yeah, they thought like, man, you got these 2 young kids, you're going to leave, take them away from family. And, you got no job prospects out there. And, I looked into it. My police training didn't directly transfer. If I wanted to be a cop out here, I would have to do some kind of makeup school in Sacramento, and it would be a whole pain, and I wasn't even sure it could happen. So, we bought a huge camper, a 38-foot camper. We rented our house to 2 police officers actually who were dating. So if you're going to rent your property, rent to police officers because they can't screw your stuff up without getting in trouble at work. So we rented to them, and we lived in my parents' backyard in our RV for like 2 months prepping for this departure. And then we did it. We spent about 40 days coming across the country. Really, it was a really weird feeling. I used to drive around in my cruiser all the time and think like, you're 10 years in, and is this going to be your next 20 years? Like, can you do this job here for 20 years? Is that what you want to do? And I really didn't. I just came to terms with the fact that I didn't want to do that. Not that it's bad, because it's a great job, and it was a great place to work. And everybody who does a career there, my hat's off to them. It's amazing. You can have a great life there, but it just wasn't for us. So, yeah, we pulled the trigger, and, I actually applied to backgrounds about 9 months before we left, just online. There's an online thing for the city of LA. Wow. I applied. Yeah, the application took forever. It was like pages and pages of scenarios and how I would react. And I really was not hopeful that it would work out at all. I sent it away, and I didn't hear a single peep, like barely even an email from personnel until I just must have hit it right. Because when we pulled in here, we were living in a campground outside LA, and I got an email saying, "Hey, are you still interested in this job? It will probably be part-time, but we'd like you to come in for an interview in the next couple of weeks." So as you can imagine, I was starting to stress a little bit. Our funds are going down, although we're not paying. I think we were paying like maybe $1,000 a month to live in a campground in San Dimas. It was beautiful, by the way, but the funds are draining and they're not being replaced. So I was very thankful when I got that email, and I went out. I bought a new suit. I bought a new shirt, a tie. I was like hell bent to get this job, and I went into backgrounds, and I had an interview. They do like role playing. Like what they do is they'll like cross it. It's like a panel, like Nora board. There's the chief personnel officer and one of the managers, and then maybe someone else who's going to role play with you. Was there a citizen in there or somebody from another department too?
No, that's just for promotions. It's usually 3 people in the higher up in backgrounds here doing the interviews.
That's what it was. It was 3 people, and they make you role play. They bring a candidate in, and they're like, he just lied to you, and how are you going to handle it? And it was all very stressful, Ken. I'm not going to lie to you. I was stressed, but I guess I played it off okay, because oddly enough, I got a call 2 weeks later for another interview, the exact same interview.
And you had never done backgrounds before, or did you have any investigative experience, or is all patrol?
No, I really didn't. Like where I worked was a small agency, so it wasn't uncommon this is one of my selling points I really try to push at the interview was
I have red hair.
Yeah, I have orange hair. You have no gingers here. What's going on?
Yeah.
Everybody's so brown.
Discrimination.
Right. So I just I really kind of stress that I come from a small agency, and patrolmen were allowed to hold cases. So if it wasn't like something you couldn't handle or didn't involve too much investigative work, patrolmen were encouraged to bring people into the interview room, do recorded interviews, continue the investigation. and like request help from the detectives if needed. So believe it or not, being from a smaller agency actually ended up being a benefit to me getting that job. So, which I couldn't believe, because you're going up against people from not only Los Angeles, but all these other Southern California is gigantic. The little cities that surround LA are big cities back east. You know what I mean? It's just the humanity on top of humanity here is insane. So I had a lot of competition. I just feel like I got really, really lucky. They called me in for a second interview. Believe it or not, Ken, the second interview was the exact same interview. When I say the exact same, it was the same oral board, same people. The same guy came in to role play for the same scenario.
And they looked at you and go, now who are you?
Yeah. So I was so caught off guard. I'm like, is this like a mind trick? Am I supposed to do this?
Am I dead?
Yeah. Am I supposed to do it differently this time? Like, but
this is your second chance.
Yeah, it was so weird. So I did I answered all the questions the exact same. And I handled the role-playing scenario the exact same. And I got a call again, and from Raphael, who just retired from there. Great guy, Raphael Casillas, retired CHP. And he told me, he was really cool. He's like, listen, you did a great job. We're only hiring part-time. And I said, geez, that's great. I'll take what I can get, but I really need a full-time gig with benefits and all that. And he said, yeah, I don't know if it's going to be that, but hang tight. And I heard from him like 2 weeks later, and he said, I don't know what happened. I don't know what you said in those interviews, but the chief she wants to offer you full time. Yeah. And I was like, this is unbelievable. Because when I left Massachusetts, they have COBRA. So when you leave your job, you can hang on to your insurance for 60 days and pay for it, but you got to pay the whole thing. So I would be if I had done that, I would have been on the hook for $2,000 or more a month.
Yeah.
But I talked to the people at whoever handles healthcare for the town, and she's like, you're covered by COBRA if you pay or not. She said, if you have an incident that costs a lot of money, like a broken arm or something, you can still have COBRA. You just have to back pay what you would have been paying anyways. And I thought, wow, that's a gamble, but that's not a bad idea. What if I just come out here, opt out of the insurance for now, and then if something really bad happened, I would have to, pony up the several $1,000s, but it would be covered. So I had that was my plan. And I was just about to I was like days from losing our health insurance. So there it was. And really the move, like I also, for 5 years, I did stand-up comedy. The last time I did it was probably a year ago. I even did a show at the Ice House, and people from backgrounds came, and it was really awesome. And I love doing stand-up. It's really competitive and really a whole different world out here. But it wasn't the reason I came out here, but it was definitely like a reason to come here. It was like, oh, wow, I'll do stand-up too. But the main reason, because that would never work. Nobody's partner would ever agree, like, yeah, let's do that for your stand-up ambitions, because that's ridiculous.
Well, I remember when I first met you, because I was introduced to you by the background investigator who trained you, the legendary Pat Buchanan.
Yes.
Legend at backgrounds.
Pat
and
is
it was
the
this
man.
redheaded kid, that came in. And he said, yeah, and he's a comedian. And I said, wait a minute, the guy's a cop and he's a stand-up comic? What is that all about? And so I Googled you, and then later on, you did a show, I think the one at the Ice House, and we got a short clip of it, but you were actually pretty funny, man. So, if anybody's out there and you want to Google Steve Gould stand-up, there might be something out there. There was only one actual video of you doing stand-up or more.
Yeah, there was. I may have scrubbed it pretty clean, but there was.
That was before Jesus.
It was your classic stand-up blunder when you just put stuff on the internet that you're not polished with yet. So I only had maybe one clip of me 5 years in, and a bunch of clips of me like 1 and 2 years in that were not great. I don't know, some part of my brain was broken where I thought that was a good idea. But yeah, can I still remember driving with Pat after, because you field train for, I think it was like 6 weeks, and Pat had just field trained someone that he had to get rid of. So the guy failed field training, and it was a disaster. So after Pat warmed up to me, he told me the story. He said, yeah, so I'm out doing field work, and I get a call from our boss, and he goes, hey, I got another one for you to train. And he's like, oh yeah, what's this guy's story? He goes, well, he's a cop from Massachusetts that moved out here, and he does stand-up comedy. And Pat was like, oh man, please no.
LA, yeah, we just don't. It's just not a normal thing, Stand-up comedian, this happy-go-lucky redhead guy comes in. He wants to be a background investigator because we're all old school, old coppers and retired guys, and so we have a lot of fun. But it was kind of a I don't know. I get even the men and the women were just macho. It was just like old school coppers, and then this guy comes in he's funny and a comedian too.
I think I was too LA for LAPD backgrounds.
That was funny. So that was pretty good. But then after a while, you kind of got used to the job, and there was a crew in there, and I'll admit it, we had our own little crew. There was about 6, 7 of us, and we would go out to the truck in the morning for breakfast, and then we'd all gather at lunchtime and all go to lunch together, and it was this tight knit group. And you were already in the group pretty quick there, I have to admit.
Well, you and Pat, you guys took me under your wings. It was like I could tell when I first met you, you were kind of like, you were very curious to meet me. You're like, this is something different in backgrounds, but you were very cool. Everybody's very, I tried to be, keep my mouth shut as much as possible. And I just really lucked out with you guys. You guys really helped me out. And I mean, and that's where the whole idea for the podcast came from. Just sitting with you guys at lunch, and the stories that would come out were like so mind blowing. I grew up a cop's kid, and I was in police work, and I knew plenty of crazy stories, but sitting with you guys and all, like, so many years of police experience from LA, it was, I just felt like people really would have a better appreciation for these guys if they heard these crazy ass stories. I mean, especially, I would love to get some of the guys on that were on like Ron's time, like when he started. Some of his stories are completely insane.
That's true. And we have a whole bunch of different people were in narco crews, and they were homicide detectives, and just the patrol guys, and just all the wild adventures that people had. And, if you did police work for any amount of time, you have a story to tell. And it was no different there, but these were all old school cops that, and anybody that's been on 10 years is old school. You've got enough time under your belt that you have some pretty good stories. And those guys did have some stories, and there was some shootouts, and there was just some homicide investigations, and just general calls, which were just wild. And I'm glad you came up with the podcast, because it's something that's needed. People need to hear these stories. And the funny thing about the podcast is that I think about it sometimes, and when you're with cops and you're talking about war stories, and you already know the lingo, and how people are going to react. But when you're doing it for the general public, it's a little different. It's like when you read a police report and there's an arrest, and somebody says, the guy wanted to throw down, and he wanted to get in a fight with us. And then the next line is, the suspect was taken into custody without further incident, meaning that, he had to be taken down.
Yeah.
But for the general public, they some people like to hear, we had a good fight with the guy, but they don't, we got to be careful when you're talking to the general public, because they don't always understand us, Steve, when we're talking about that stuff.
Absolutely. And that was one of my biggest, I was like almost wincing when I first started asking you guys to share your stories, because it was such a great idea to me. And then when it actually came down to finding people, I was like, ooh, I don't know. These guys want to let people into the, you know what I mean? Let people hear this stuff. But thankfully, a few of you guys were okay with it. And I think ultimately people have a good time. They like airing their stories. I mean, there's some stories that we haven't heard that are just so like, I won't name names or anything, but one guy was telling a story about waking up in the cruiser and his partner's already firing his gun out the window as they drive down the highway. It's like, what? Holy cow. I was like, cowboys back in the day.
Yeah. Well, you had 10 years on the job, and what I want to know from you is that you did a video because you have that video channel called Gould's Gaining Ground.
Right.
And your last video from Massachusetts was your last day, and it was a kind of a somber tone to the video. What did it feel like? Because I don't know that there's much of a difference when someone has 10, 20, 30 years on. When you hand in that badge, or you hand in your keys or your ID card or whatever it is, and this is real. I'm actually leaving police work, and the fun that I used to have in going to calls and smoking and joking with the other officers, that camaraderie, it's going to be gone. How did you deal with that?
It was really surreal, and it felt, I got to tell you, like you're saying, not doing the full ride, not going, putting the career in and retiring, it felt weird. Even just handing the badge in, you know what I mean? You always kind of it's like you're part of that club, that brotherhood, that, and you, not to mention, I mean, cops work really hard for that badge. Like pretty much every state, like, I think ours was a 21 or 22 week program. It sucked, it was, inspections and paramilitary. And like, when you're in that, it's like, this is what I want to do forever. You know what I mean? So, and I have to say, graduating from police academy was one of the happiest days of my life. Even compared to like college, it just, like, for accomplishments, it just felt so good. And I don't want to toot my own horn here, but I also got Top Gun, so that was pretty sweet.
Outstanding, which led to other places that in your career.
Yeah, I actually became a firearms like a range master, and I had a good career. It was good, but I was so ready to leave that it wasn't as hard as I thought when I left that day. And when I made that video, it did come out, that video, it must have struck a chord, because it has over 700,000 views now, or 600,000.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Crazy.
A lot of views. And you can only imagine the loving and not so loving comments that are on that thing.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
A lot of them are just like, why don't you kill yourself now?
Yeah, stupid people.
Thank you.
I've experienced that stuff on my Facebook page too. But that just seemed like it was a real somber moment for you. But you guys are kind of adventurers, and I want to go back to, you grew up in a police family.
Yes.
And so you were kind of in the mix of it with your dad and all that. But still, back in the 90s, when I was working in the background unit as a sworn officer, they had a question on the application. We used to have the application for the city, the PHS, and then there would be what was called a PIQ, which was another, I don't even know how many, 100-something questions. One of them was this. Basically, I'm going to paraphrase it because I'm sure this isn't the legalese that was on the form. But the question generally was asked, would you have a problem killing somebody? And I wanted to know from you, when did you even consciously think of it that you might have to one day pull the trigger and end somebody's life? And what does it, did you ever ask your or go through that and decide at some point I may have to kill someone, and I'm okay with that?
Not till later. I never initially thought about that, and that was not a question for us. That is very interesting, though, and a good question. I never really thought about that until later in my career. You know, like right before I transferred to be a police officer for Eastham, our police department, believe it or not, like this whole area, Cape Cod, it's a nice area. Growing up, I didn't know a lot of police officers who shot people, like a handful. So it wasn't a real thing I really thought I would have to do. And if I did have to do it, I kind of just thought, well, if I did it, I have common sense. It would be righteous, and I wouldn't feel bad because it would be me or him. Like, you know, I would just kind of justify that way and then put it away. But right when I was interviewing for the job, believe it or not, there was a kid in Eastham who had real mental health problems. He was like 20, early 20s. I went to high school with him, but he was younger than me. And he was this kid that was like, the address would go off and everybody go, oh, here we go. Like, what's he going to do now? Like several trips to the hospital, several Section 12s, which means, taken to the hospital for a psychiatric eval against your will. So this kid was bumping around town, and he finally totally lost it, donned a bulletproof vest and shot up the front of our police department.
Oh, crap.
Which, for Cape Cod, for anywhere really in the Northeast. I mean, how often do you hear about a police department getting shot up, So right. This kid is in a bulletproof vest across the highway from us, kind of a wooded area in our little windmill area park. He's over there just taking pot shots at the front of the PD with a handgun. I think it was a 40 cal or 9. I don't remember. Jeez. But yeah, there's a meeting we used to let people use, the whole front of our police department was bulletproof from dispatch back. But there was a meeting room up front where, the admin and stuff would meet for storms and kind of like the command center area, that we would let the council on aging, we would let neighborhood watch, anybody could use this room. So they're actually, I think it was neighborhood watch was in there. And meanwhile, bullets are coming through. Wow. No one even knew till later. Then they were like, oh, okay. Yeah. So this kid shoots up the front of our police department and, goes and hides in the marsh. We call in other towns to help. And a friend of mine actually ends up being on a post at this little road by the marsh, just very Cape Cod area. Like, have you ever seen Dawson's Creek? Like, the marshes and the nice houses. Yeah. He's just standing there with another cop who's a buddy of mine. And they're on post. And they hear some noise behind them. And sure enough, they put their flashlights on and they have their patrol rifles. And up pops this kid. He's got the bulletproof vest, raises his gun, and they take him out with an AR-15. And this was really uncharacteristic for Cape Cod, like I said. So it's funny you asked that question because during the interview, the town administrator's like, we want you to know that this shooting that happened at the police department, that's not common here. And, the chief is like, yeah, he grew up here. He knows it's not common. But that actually started the ball with me thinking, when you're a cop and you go home or on your way into work, you kind of play scenarios and how you would react. Mm-hmm. Like you think, okay, if this happens, what will I do? It's kind of a good way to prep yourself for action. You'll go to your training and how will I handle it if this guy does this or if this happens? That kind of started the ball, I think, with all of us thinking like, okay, if I had to shoot someone, what would this be like? Because my friend who had to shoot this kid, he had some real issues afterwards. He didn't digest well, as you can imagine. The kid was not well, and he obviously was looking to hurt the police, but still it really impacted his life in a not great way. So I actually did think about that a lot after that incident.
Yeah, there's a lot of people. It's funny when people find out that you were a cop or you are a cop. Common question from people: Did you ever have to pull your gun? Did you ever have to shoot somebody? It's a Hollywood type of scenario where, oh yeah, we did. It's not like that, because if you talk to anybody that's been in a shooting, it's not cool.
No,
they would not do it again if they had a chance to redo. No. They would not do it because it messes with your head. And then it comes at, like the original question was, have you ever come to terms with it? And I think that any police officer that's had to pull their gun out and point it at somebody, the only time you're ever going to point it at someone, if you're willing to pull the trigger and kill somebody. And it's not until you get to that point where you've either come that close, which I think many police officers have gotten that close to where their finger was going on that trigger. And then at the last second, I mean the millisecond, okay, no shoot. But you can later on go back and say, holy crap, I almost killed somebody. And I think that's maybe more of the time when people think about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I can remember a bunch of things happening at our place where, like you say, that opportunity, let's call it, arises where you technically could use deadly force. Like you would be okay. And then we just didn't. Like I can remember a call when I wasn't on it, but buddy of mine and a sergeant ended up gang tackling a kid who was wielding a knife just because he was 17 and they really didn't want to shoot him. Is that tactically the best move? Probably not. You probably could have shot him. Plenty of commands, guns are drawn. He's not listening, but they didn't. Like, yeah, they're like you say there. It's when it comes down to it, that's something cops definitely avoid.
Yeah, I had two situations where I could have pulled the trigger, and for some reason I stopped, and I have no clue why. No clue why. It just didn't seem like the threat was, or it just the threat stopped or something like that. But you've got seconds to think about that, and it's not. I don't think a lot of people, when they're applying for the job or when they just are just citizens listening to this podcast, I don't think they actually get a sense of the gravity of the situation of there's either, if you've been a police officer long enough, you've known someone that has killed someone, coworkers. I have a lot of coworkers from LAPD that have killed people. Yeah. And that's just the way it is. And you don't really think about it, or you have almost killed someone or killed someone. And it's just the nature of the game. But I think a lot of people, they gloss over all of that, and the intensity of the job is very, very difficult. Let me ask you something about death.
Okay.
Dead people. Just, before, when I first came on the job, I think, God, I can't remember if I had ever been to a funeral or not, but if I did see, a dead person in a coffin, that's probably the extent of it. If I did, I don't recall that. And I was hired at 22. So that was a good number of years and not seeing. And then all of a sudden I get into LA, people are just dying all over the place. They're either dying in their bed, they're getting shot in the street, tons of murders and stuff like that. And it's a real eye opener. When you, and I have a follow-up question to this after you answer it. Did you have a culture shock when you went into police work and then seeing dead bodies or the way people died? Did it bother you or affect you in any way?
Oh yeah, it totally bothered me. Man, that was my thing that bothered me was dead bodies and bodies in just unnatural positions. I mean, I kind of got known for it a little bit. Like I remember working with a rookie, and we just went on this horrible unattended death, and it just was horrific. The guy was face down. His face looked like how lividity and all that happens, the blood pool. Unreal looking, and slime and goo, and it just insane. And he kind of took the camera from me. He's like, "I'll take the picture, Steve." And he kind of knew that. He kind of knew, like, I was like, "Oh, this is really grossing me out."
So you guys took your own pictures of the dead bodies?
Sometimes, like this one was like borderline. Usually we call the medical examiner, and we'd call the state police. And in Massachusetts, a department, there's only 3 departments that can handle their own homicides in Massachusetts. It's Springfield, Worcester, and Boston, and then of course the state police. The reason being, I guess towns just don't want the murders and homicides are so irregular in the small towns that it doesn't make sense. The training that a cop would need, it doesn't make sense to do that just give it to the state, and then your agency can do can mirror them in their investigation, but they're the lead agency. So that was kind of like that kind of call where it was like it was cleared by all the ME and stuff, but my sergeant was kind of like, well, grab some pictures anyways because this one's really bad, and the guy had a history, and so that was the case. But yeah, man, seeing the human body in unnatural contortions, and especially young people and people I knew, that's sometimes when I kind of envied officers. I went to a regional police academy, so we had guys that were, they went to Quincy, they went to New Bedford, Brockton. Some of them ended up in Boston. Like they were seeing and dealing with people they didn't know on a daily basis. When you're a town guy where you grew up, it's always people whether they're dead, hung themselves, gassed themselves, got killed in a car wreck. It made it so much worse to me to like the first time I saw really that just the eyes open with the mouth and that just someone so dead, like they're just gone, like their soul is gone. You're just looking at a vessel and it's just so spooky. It's like, what?
It's like, what happened
when
this went down? That's like their face. A lot of times the people's faces, they look like this. They were fighting to not go.
Yeah. It's just very eerie. And, I bought a sandwich from this guy. He was a bar manager I knew in town. I'd bought dinner from him that night, I think. And, got a call back there that he dropped dead. And, one of the girls from the kitchen was kind of impishly trying to do CPR on him and didn't know what she was doing. And I came in with the paramedics, and that one really bothered me. Like I thought that next morning, first thing I thought about was his face, like, whoa.
Did you ever have, nightmares, dreams about things that you had seen?
I never did. I had some real gory stuff, but in my waking hours, it would bother me, but it never entered my dreams. Maybe I'd have some anxiety-ridden dreams that were spurred by it, but nothing with the actual event or the person in it, thankfully. I could go down an alley in the middle of the night, guns drawn, looking for the bad guy, but I had a real hard time because I know that with dead bodies, if you get too close to the dead body and their face, they will wake up and spit death in your face. And that was scary because dead bodies are dead. And no matter how many times you've seen them, you're either comfortable with it or you're not uncomfortable. And I think that you can go, like I say, you can go to a funeral where it's a, open casket and it's always the same. They're just laying there. But with dead body calls, it's either a homicide or they died in their sleep, or they just looked really unhappy when they died. That's different because it's just like a spooky thing. It's like that kind of, sometimes it creeped me out. And then you have to wait. You're the guy, you and your partner are the guy that are sitting there waiting for the coroner and the detectives to get there. So who knows how long you're sitting there in the room with the dead body, knowing it was not a pleasant experience. And it's just a weird feeling when you're, calls like that can kind of creep you out a little bit depending on how the person died. Absolutely. I mean, you're causing me to catalog back all the dead bodies. But I mean, like you said, people die in even like I'll never forget this one guy died on the toilet. This older guy and his son knew that he was having trouble pooping or something. So he came down and lied on the couch outside the bathroom, but he fell asleep because his dad was like, I don't feel good and whatever. He's the one that called in the morning. He called and said, we came down at 2 a.m. and now it's 7 and he never came out and I checked on him. But the guy completely unsupported by anything, hands on his own thighs, sitted straight up, eyes open, mouth open, like he was surprised, dead, frozen, completely frozen. And I'm like touching him a little bit. And he's kind of like, he's got rigor. He's just kind of like, he's just frozen. I was like, how did that happen?
You ever find out what happened?
No, he had a ton of medical issues. And, like first thing we would do with elderly person like that is they'd have a file of life on their fridge. Mm-hmm. And it would give you a list of their medications, their doctors, what was wrong with them. And I would read that to the medical examiner. and depending on what the witnesses there had to say, they would yay or nay an autopsy or an investigation. So this one, I think they just figured, this guy was just super old and he died. But it was just, it boggles the mind,
I had a dead body call one time where it was at a Century 21 office, the real estate. And back in the 80s, I don't know if they still do it, but the Century 21 guys, they would wear those gold jackets.
Nice.
And so this old guy, I think he was maybe in his late 60s, close to 70. Anyways, he dies behind his real estate desk. So we get in there and he's got his nice shirt and his gold Century 21 jacket, no pants at all. Guy had no underwear, no pants on, just sitting at his desk, and he died. What a horrible thing to happen. People to find you, and everybody's going to go, hey, what was Jim doing with no pants on? It was like weird.
That is so weird.
Yeah, I mean, but it happened. So I guess he didn't plan on that happening that day, but it did, and so that's something I remember now. But another question from the question that we just had, people, there's something called gallows humor, police humor, stuff like that, where stuff that other people just don't find funny, but we can find funny in the most terrible situations. Did you learn that, or have you always been irreverent when it comes to humor?
No. I've always had, I always say I probably had a good sense of humor, but, I was like a fish in water with that kind of humor, when I took right to it with that kind of, like kind of black or dark humor, they call it, it's just, it's like a real coping mechanism at a bad scene where everybody just, once it calms down and everybody's been helped that needs to be helped and there's no more helping anybody and you're kind of just at peace with where you are and what's going on, it just starts, it just comes out. And, as far as I can tell, it's just, I think it's a healthy reaction. It's just coping. You're trying to make this horrible moment a little more tolerable. I can even remember going to a horrible death scene and people heating up coffees in the guy's microwave. Like he wouldn't mind, would he? My coffee's cold.
There's going to scenes and being in the house waiting, like I said, waiting for the coroner. I went to a shooting one time where the guy got shot in the back with through a window with a 1 ounce shotgun slug. So he's kind of laying there on the floor, and he was by the door, and we kind of had to push the door open to get past the guy. And then it's freezing outside, so it must have been winterish. And there were like maybe 4 of us there, and it was a very small apartment, so it was a very tiny living room. The guy's lying there dead at the front door, and we are watching the football game on his TV because he was watching at the time. We're watching the football game, go, oh yeah, and all this kind of stuff. And I could look at that stuff, and it's funny to me back then, the things that we used to do. But I don't know if a lot of people understand that type of humor. But it is a mechanism, survival mechanism, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And it's in varying degrees. Like we've all been to a scene like that with the guy that is just over the top and makes you cringe, like, ooh, he's right there. You know what I mean? That like I still remember a horrible accident I went to, and there ended up being, long story short, brains on the pavement, and the medical examiner showed up to collect the body parts, and he's using this person's CDs that spilled out of their car to scrape brain up. And he holds up the CD with the brain on and goes, "Road mix."
Yeah. Well, I'm not laughing at
it. And we're like, oh boy, this guy has been doing this for too long.
That's classic. That type of thing is classic. And I hope people understand that it's not that cops just don't care. We have to survive, Absolutely. And it's just something that we do. Steve.
Sir.
Tell me the most crazy, high energy, adrenaline pumping call you ever went on.
Okay, I got to sort through these because I have told some in the past on the podcast. I don't want to be a repeater, but I think one of them, and it doesn't. Well, I'll put it this way. So there's a local family who's kind of has some problem family. The kids are real issues. Oh, geez, should I do this one, Ken? I have a couple. Okay, I'll tell a few. I'll make them quick.
Hey, you know what? Now that we've got this little tiny break, there's people that haven't listened to every podcast, and so you can redo stories, and it's cool.
Okay,
mark that.
So I'll tell this one first. This was a call where we got this call that the son is in the house. He's like 18, plays a lot of video games, has some emotional issues. We know him. He's called the police department on the recording line and told dispatch that I've killed my mother and her friend, and I've cut their heads off.
Oh,
so
dang.
If you want to come here and try to take me in, go for it. I'm ready. So we're calling this number back. No one's picking up. He's not picking up. He says, I'm at my house, gives the address. He says, I'm on the second story, waiting for you guys. So dispatch comes over with this, and we're like, whoa, okay, this is insane. So I organize the town on either side of us. We're in a peninsula here, so we don't have towns north, south, east, west. In East Tame, it's just north and south. The other is just water. So north and south towns show up. We mobilize outside, right around the corner from the house. Patrol rifles drawn. I happen to be the officer in charge, which was like giving me major heartburn because, I've been on patrol probably 7-8 years at this point. So I know what to do, but I never tested or tried to be sergeant for a reason. I didn't really want that responsibility, but it was thrust upon me. So I'm in charge of this call. I have other cops in our town. We're trying to organize. I get the chief calling me, wanting updates, and we haven't even approached the house yet or made contact. So just like the caller said, we get around the corner, either side of the street. We're approaching the home with our guns, and we're just amped up. We're like, oh my gosh, this kid finally did it. This is nuts. And we totally thought he was capable. So sure enough, there's the house, second story, one light on in the whole house on the second story. And we can't make out what's going on in the window. And we're like, all right, this is it. So we I think there's 5 of us. We move in. We're like, there's SWAT guys there. A SWAT guy was there. Who's a buddy of mine. So he's like, Steve, do you want to leapfrog the approach? I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? He's like, I'll go, then you go, and then on that side. And he's starting to throw these tactics. I'm like, just stick to the wood line and let's get to the house. I don't know the battle signals. I don't understand any of this. Just stay outside and don't get shot by this kid. So we go in, we're getting right up to the front door, guns drawn, and his mom comes out. She's like, what the hell are you doing? And we're like, I got my fingers on the safety. I'm ready, doors opening. So, it's not a big shooting story, but it was one of the calls that got me the most amped because I thought it was real. You know what I mean? We were like, my heartbeat was in my throat. I was like, whew, here we go. And the mom comes out and listen to this. This is what happened. This kid is such a dick online that he makes other gamers hate his guts. So he pissed off this kid from overseas somewhere. He thought maybe Russia. And this kid from Russia evidently could do a really good American accent. So he did what they called swatting.
Yeah.
He put in his address and his phone number and called our police department so it looked like it was legit.
Oh, man.
So we were ready to storm the house and take care of business. And meanwhile, they're in there, eating chips, watching TV. The mom's in her pajamas, just about crapped herself when she came out. And I, at this point, I'm like, so obviously we make sure everybody's safe and get in the house. And once it all got calmed down, we were in the living room and I'm like, listen, this is what happened. This is what your son did. And she's like, no internet for a week. And I'm like, a week?
For a week, huh?
How about the rest of his life? My gosh.
Wow.
So that was one call that came to mind that I never told on the podcast. But, they're not always, the calls that get you so jacked up aren't always, it's just the perception of what's going to happen, you know?
Yeah, it's the belief that what you're gonna encounter. That was kind of a rough one there when you think already in your mind this horrific scene that you're going to see.
Yeah, I'm already trying to cope with someone's head. I'm like, all right, it's going to be a severed head. Just
yeah. Do we put it in a bag? Do we have bags for that, or how's this going to all work out? You know,
in this same scenario had happened in Harwich, a couple towns over from us years before. This guy, they let him out early from the insane asylum. He walked home, was stopped by a cop on the street and said, "Where are you going, Jimmy?" He goes, "Going back to mom's house." "All right, have a good one." Half an hour later at the house, mom's head's cut off.
Oh,
so
no.
That story also is in my head. So
that has happened.
That one was pretty crazy. Then I actually do have, you'll like this, Ken. I have a gunshot one I responded to that was just bizarre. So the town next to us, there's a town called Wellfleet. They're the only town around that area that has a trailer park. So usually when you get a call in the trailer park, it's usually some pretty redneck stuff going on. You know, like someone squirted Mountain Dew in my eyes and I'm blind, you know, something insane. So we get a call, respond with Wellfleet to the trailer park for gunshot wound to the chest. So no further info. No, not that it was an accident or a suicide or anything like that. So we show up and I meet the sergeant out front for his town. Good guy. I'm good friends with him. And he goes, "Let's do it." So we go in. And we go in there, and there's these two girls, and they're like in their early 20s. And one of them's crying, and one of them's like breathing, like trying to like get herself together to tell us. Mm-hmm. She goes, we were playing with her dad's 22, and it went off, and it shot me in the chest.
Oh, no.
So we're looking at her, and we're like, it did? So her friend has the gun. It's like a pneumatic pump 22. Like a pellet gun. Oh. And I'm like, all right, well, those are pretty, I mean, they go 800-900 feet per second, so they can definitely cause some damage. But I'm like, where in your chest? Like, are you okay? So she's so nervous. She grabs the underwire from her bra and flips her whole shirt up over her head. Breasts come out, everything. Boom. And she goes, right here. And right between her breasts is a perfect 22 caliber hole.
Oh man.
In her breastplate. So I'm like, whoa. I'm like, so she's like, "Hey, we pumped, you know, my dad uses it for raccoons. We pumped it like, I don't know, 8-10 times." And I'm thinking, I'm a gun nerd. So I think it was a Benjamin 22. And I know muzzle velocity at those things, 8 to 10 pumps is 800-900 feet per second, which is equivalent to a 22 short, which is a real rifle round. So I'm like, okay, you've been shot for real. Like this thing is in you. So she starts like, she's hyperventilating and asking the cop from their town all these questions, and rescue's on the way. And all of a sudden she's like, and blood just starts coming out of her mouth when she's talking. And she's like, "Oh my gosh." She's like, "Is this bad? Does this mean am I dying? Like, is this bad?" And I'm just looking at her with my eyes like tea saucers, like,
yeah,
yes,
that's internal bleeding, man.
That's bad. So, anyways, she passes out. We're checking her vitals. Rescue comes, and she got taken to the hospital, and they removed a 22 caliber wad cutter pellet from her lung.
Oh, wow.
So those wad cutters are flat, you know, so they punch a hole. So when you're target shooting, you can see where, you know, you can see the nice circle. Well, it put that nice circle right in her breastplate. So that was pretty, I mean, that wasn't, I wouldn't know if that was so intense, but it was like definitely like, what? This is so weird.
It's very, you know, when people get shot, they normally aren't sitting there like, "I got shot," you know, and they're talking to you and stuff like that. So that was kind of weird. And if the 22s, if I'm not mistaken, if they go ricocheting around in you, you can get some pretty bad damage.
Yeah, it's a small round that really penetrates. So yeah, she was in bad shape. It was, I mean, it was bizarre.
Yeah. Wow. That's kind of messed up. And it happens a lot. You know, these kids, they go playing with guns thinking whatever, and it usually turns out kind of bad. You read stories about the kids were playing with a gun and, you know, Jimmy's okay. You know, it's always ends up bad, but she lucked out there, huh?
Yeah. She ended up she ended up going to the hospital, getting the bullet extracted, and as far as I knew, she was released and she was fine. But I mean, who would have thought? I mean, two drunk girls with a pellet gun,
Now, how old were they?
in their 20s, early 20s.
Oh, geez. So they're not 12 or something like that. But hey, question for you.
Yes.
10-year copper. Just being a cop. How did you end up being in such a strong marriage? Because and this goes on. I got two questions for you. A lot of cops self-medicate, having to deal with the job and stuff like that. They turn to sometimes they turn to drugs. A lot of times alcohol and all that. How did you survive the whole trauma of being a police officer? And you guys have an awesome, strong marriage. How did you do it?
Yes, thank you. We do. Well, Carrie and I I would say we're made for each other. We get along very well. We're very cognizant of each other's goals and feelings and wishes, and we both we don't hold anything back. We don't go to bed angry. We don't not talk about something. Like we just don't stuff things. We just tell each other exactly how we feel. Even in police academy, Carrie was the girlfriend who was waking up at 4 a.m. to iron the seams in my pants and iron my patch so it had a crease and send me off every day with my lunch. She just was very, she was just great that way. But it not that it was always great on the job, because I did midnights for 5 years straight.
Wow. Oh no.
Yeah. And that really, I mean, when I got off midnights, she was like, wow, I'm kind of remembering what you used to be like. She said, like, she would get little windows of me being normal, but it was like I was, for me anyways, doing midnights, I just never fully adapted. It would, your first day off, you go to sleep. The next day you have off, and then before you know it, you're back at work. So it's like, you're always getting screwed up on midnights. And it got to the point where I had just enough seniority to get off midnights and maybe go to evenings or whatever. And at the time I was also running a landscape business with my buddy. So we were mowing lawns during the day, which now if I think about it, it makes me I think I'd have a heart attack. But back then I'd work all day and then go mow for 8 hours, sleep for 6, and go to work and do it again.
Oh my God.
So she knew I liked this business. I was doing it with one of my best friends. We were making really good money. And she's like, it was one of the few times in my career where she said, I don't like this. I don't like midnights, and you need to get off them.
Oh, yeah, that happens.
So I said, and she doesn't talk to me like that. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like we don't have that kind of relationship. So when she says something like that, I'm like, time to look real deep into the situation here. And, not going to blow this off. So she said it a few times, and I said, you're right. I'm kind of just in this rut of doing what I'm doing with these two jobs. But, yeah, you're probably right. And we were just thinking about, we were just actually had a young daughter at the time, and I was never around. And, yeah, I listened and I said, okay, you're right. And next bid, I went to evenings, which made it, evenings were great. I came home around 1, woke up with them, had breakfast, could do stuff during the day, could help her during the day. Then I'd go to work, they'd go to bed. So that kind of worked out. But, yeah, I definitely think it was, I would say don't get attached to, the shift you're doing or the assignment you have, or don't sacrifice your marriage for something that's going on at work, because it's really not worth it, because your marriage is the most important thing in your life, to me anyways.
Yeah, it's just a job. It's a job. You can't be married to the job. I had one guy, it was a classmate of mine that we actually worked patrol together, and he told me one night that his wife just told him, yeah, it's either me or the job. So, and he refused to leave the job. And the last time I remember that they didn't get divorced, but she put him to him and said, that this is not what she signed up for. The job, being the job of a police wife or a police spouse is difficult. And it's not, the officers are going out there doing their thing, and they're either having fun or in their job. They love their job or whatever, and the spouses are generally at home, and it's a tough thing. And it's just like when Carrie said to you, you get off of, graveyard, and you have to think about, this is my marriage, and it's not easy. It's not easy for some guys and gals to do.
No, it really isn't. Not at all. And that's a big joke too. Like when you get hired as a cop, they're like, all the salty dogs are like, "Oh, is this your first marriage?" Kind of like, I remember hearing that being like, it's my first and the only, because if this one doesn't work out, it ain't happening again. I'm not doing 3 like you. You know what I mean?
No, and it's like it's a regular thing for a lot of people. I mean, everybody who's been on the job for any amount of time knows several people. They're either in their, which marriage number is this, or they're single again. But there's not very many. Officers that they're just I'm single and this is just the best thing ever, and I never want to get married. It's not. I don't want to paint a picture that it's a bad thing, but it is common that people sometimes take police work too seriously, and then they trade their families for the job. And piggyback onto another question that I have for you. How do you think drinking affects officers on the job?
Well, drinking for me, when I first started, of course, I was, in my 20s, so it went right along. Went right along with my lifestyle already. I've always liked to have a few libations, but it's for me anyways, it's a big part of the police culture. Like I noticed, drinking beers, choir practice, like right after, if you're on midnights, go to someone's house afterward. Or I'll never forget, I was at midnights for a while, and you're in your 20s, so you're not thinking about your health anyways, you know what I mean? But I remember being at midnights for a while and getting my physical, and the doctor's like, how many beers do you drink? And I remember thinking, oh, screw it, I'll just tell him, it's my doctor. I'm not going to lie to the guy about alcohol consumption. So I said, I usually get off shift. I have 2 or 3, usually with breakfast, like with a bowl of cereal, and then go to bed and do that about 5 days a week. And then on the weekends, I probably have, 5 to 10 a night. And he was like, what? That's really? So many beers. I'm like, is it really? He's like, yeah, Steve. He goes, that's way too many beers. He was like, that's like a case of beer a week. And to me, I hadn't even thought about it. I was like, who cares? That's what everybody my age, especially in police work, wasn't really uncommon. And like I said, I wasn't really thinking about my health. I felt fine. But he was, I handed it to my doctor. He said, listen, this is going to catch up with you. You can't he goes, trust me, I'm a doctor. I worked emergency room. I did the shift life. He goes, you can't have this much alcohol and continue shift work. Things are going to start happening, like, pre-diabetes, weight gain, depression, whatever. He said, you might be fine right now, but it's going to creep up. It's going to catch up with you. And it did, because if I had a night where there was something I witnessed or was involved in something that was grotesque or horrible or whatever, there would be a few more beers afterwards. You know what I mean? It just kind of becomes like a normal coping thing. And then, if you have 3 or 4 beers and go to sleep, you feel like you sleep like the dead, but you don't. Your body doesn't appropriately enter REM. And, I read about all this stuff when he was warning me. And, it's very much part of the police culture, drinking beers with the boys, and some, like anything, some people can handle it and some people can't. Like some people, it destroys them. I had a friend of mine who worked at the police department with me was slowly going down the lane of alcoholism. So he was a detective, and he was smelling like booze sometimes. like at roll call and stuff, we'd be like, is that old booze or new booze? Like one of those things where nobody wanted to say anything because you don't want to be the guy that goes, hey, I think he's drinking. You know what I mean? It's like, because it's like you're all tight, you're all friends. But people were getting concerned. And eventually he got caught going into the evidence room and drinking some like confiscated vodka.
Oh, geez.
So it got bad, and it got to the point where he was confronted by the administration, and they told him, he needed to go. I think he did go away to rehab. Came back. It all started again. I'll never forget. I was in the Packy getting myself some beers, and I saw him, and I was like, man, like, not that I'm anyone to talk, and I just waved and said hello, but he's buying booze. And I knew he had just gotten out of rehab, and I said, oh, boy, this isn't good. And, it wasn't too long after that he got relieved of duty, left the police department, got in his car, drove to one of our bay beaches that's kind of beautiful, overlooks the bay, Cape Cod Bay, and put his gun to his head and killed himself.
Oh.
So that's an extreme example, but that was definitely a guy that could not stop drinking. And I think they researched in an effort to get maybe his wife, his retirement or something. They looked at the amount of suicides and death calls that he attended through his career, because he'd been on over 20 years. And it was, it was a big number. So I think they were trying to use that as, a way to get some retirement for the family. Because I'm not sure how it works with the retirement board or what they would get otherwise. They might get a diminished number, but they were trying to get the family like the full retirement because of mental health issues. So, I didn't expect to talk about that, but that did happen. It was horrific. Yeah,
there's the whole thing with the, like you were saying, choir practice, choir boys, where I don't know if people actually know that choir practice is where you go drinking. And then if you go to choir practice, you're a choir boy.
Oh yeah. I should have said that.
That came from I think that came from the old LAPD book or LAPD. And then Joseph Wambaugh had a book, I think, called The Choir Boys. And I even had one in 1981 through 87 or something like that. My license plate was choir boy.
Really?
Yeah.
You don't drink much now at all.
Yeah.
Did you used to hit it hard?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I tried to be an alcoholic. It runs in my family, and I just couldn't pull it off. I tried very, very hard to do it. Just didn't agree with me. I stopped drinking, I think, when I had kids, and it just wasn't suited. It wasn't working for me. But I've drove buddies home from the academy. The academy has, I don't know if they still do. I think they do. They had a bar, and they, every Wednesday night, payday, we'd go drinking at the academy, and people would get, sauced really bad.
Ooh, I bet.
Wednesday nights. And they even did a story in the LA Times about it, how prevalent it was. But and I've had a good friend of mine, he drank himself to death. I just read about him, and not recently, but years ago in his obituary, all of a sudden in the LA Times, he had died, but he drank himself to death. And I had heard about it, that he was going down that road, but he was a functioning alcoholic. I'd see him every time I saw him, he had a Diet Coke in his hand. Turns out he was mixing it.
Oh, yeah.
And drinking on the job. There's a lot of functioning alcoholics on the police departments. And a lot of times they might be prone to it, but I think a lot of times they self-medicate, to try and cope, because it's not cool to be weak and to be a police officer. And then they end up drinking themselves to death or getting in trouble, or there's officers that have been in DUI crashes where they killed themselves. And in 1980, when I went through the academy, didn't think anything about it when they had a class. And I never forget this. We had an actual class on the department's, I wouldn't call it an alcoholism class, but it was alcoholism prevention class, where a sergeant named Jack DeCrank. I remember his name specifically. It was a well-known program. He was an alcoholic, and when you get popped for some kind of alcohol-related incident on LAPD, they put you on a contract, and if you do it again, you get fired. But they don't fire you outright. They make sure you go to treatment and everything. And he had a class on how to avoid becoming an alcoholic. Didn't think twice about it at the time, but then afterwards, it was just like you say, it was it's like they issue you a gun, they issue you cuffs, and they issue you a bottle of booze. It's part of the job.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really how it feels. You know, it's just definitely, and most people, when they get involved or when they get on the job, you're too young to realize it. You want to have a good time. You know, it's an exciting job. You want to unwind. You want to have a couple pops and talk about the war stories, and it's just very easy to get go down the wrong road for sure.
Yeah, and you want to be part of the group, and you want to be cool. You want to be accepted. And so you go and, hey kid, we're going to celebrate you getting off probation. Go ahead and buy a couple of cases of beer, and we're going to meet you on the rooftop over here at this Sears building and celebrate that's how you did it. That's how you were accepted. So yeah, I think people don't get that alcoholism is a big, big deal on the police departments, and they're very, very active. A lot of police departments are very active in programs to help officers to not do that because it's a big problem. So, couple of closing questions for you, Steve.
Okay.
Cop haters. What would you say to people who just hate the police?
Oh, those cop haters.
Cop haters.
That's a really good question, and it's really nuanced, I think, because people hate the police for a lot of different reasons. You know, they hate the police because the way they seem betrayed. They hate the police because how they seem on the media. They hate the police for the same reasons like every human hates someone telling them what to do. You know what I mean? Like, no one really likes the heavy, like the guy, the person that's going to tell you what to do. No one likes to be told what to do, including cops. Like, nobody, I've heard so many cops tell stories about like being pulled over and then, you know, a cop gives them a talking to, or they get a parking ticket and they're so pissed off. You know what I mean? But you're speaking specifically about like people who just irrationally hate the police. Doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter anything. They're just going to hate the police. Yeah. I would say, you know, they're just people, you know, like that's kind of cliche to say, but they really are. I mean, like we were just talking about the alcohol thing. It's like they're people, they hurt, they have the same feelings. You can run into a plumber or a contractor or a sales associate somewhere and they're a complete dick and you hate them. And then you can say, well, all these plumbers, all these contractors, are the same, you know, but cops get it way, way worse because cops have the ability to take your freedom away, and they also, in the line of their job, can legally take your life. You know, they can kill you, like a cop and a judge are two people that in the course of their job, they could take your life away. So I think they're just held to an impossibly high standard, where I think cops should be held to a higher standard because they should be doing the right thing because they're enforcing the rules. But people, they think they should be perfect, and no one can ever live up to that. No one can ever be, no profession, no person, man is flawed. You know, there's not going to be any like Dudley Do-Right perfect cop out there. There's certainly not going to be, you know, tens of thousands of them like we have in the country. You know, there's always going to be the guys that just keep in mind, like the ones that cause the problems get the attention. Like I read an article once that said under 1% of cops that are investigated are actually ever found to be at fault for the charges. So under 1% of how many cops are there? Hundreds of thousands? I mean, in the country?
Yeah, I can't remember. I know there's a number. I can't remember, 100,000 or something like that.
That's pretty good. I mean, there's some pretty heavy vetting going on when people choose police officers. So I would just say really try to have some empathy. Try to put yourself in their shoes. Really try to imagine what it's like to be a cop. Because like you were saying, like people think, hey, you ever shoot anybody? Get in a shootout? Like to someone, and I used to feel like that. Before you're a cop, you think like, oh yeah, that'd be cool. You know, like it's not cool. It's horrible. It can ruin your life. You know, like people, you really have to do some mental gymnastics to give cops a fair shake if you're hating them. You know what I mean? That's what I would say. Try to be empathetic to their job, what they do.
Yeah, that's true. That's very well said. Because my answer, if you asked me, what would you say to cop haters? My answer would be, yeah, screw them. I got nothing to say other than that.
That's also a very good answer.
That's an outstanding answer, I thought.
Yeah.
So in closing, I have one more question for you.
Okay.
This is I picked this up from a podcast called Things Police See, and it's an outstanding question. What would you say to those young kids out there that want to be a police officer?
Oh boy, that's a tough one. I'd say, actually, you know what? I think some good advice would be, really look into the job. It's not like any other job, really. It's a great job, and you might love it. But I would say get involved with your local police department where you are. See if you can do a ride along. See if you can get yourself into a situation that you're going to be in every day as a cop. You know what I mean? Like, cause like we're saying, people look at police work from the outside the bubble. You're looking at it from what the movies you've seen and the cops episodes you've seen or whatever. Try to get involved. Try to go to a police department. Try to go on a ride along. Try to see what it's really like. And if you think, you can handle it and that you'd be good at it, go for it. I mean, I think it can be, I know so many guys that are cops that consider it the best job in the world. But we used to have a guy, one of our chiefs who retired, he came back as a reserve. So once in a while you'd be riding around with like a reserve who's now, you know, below you in rank, but was the chief. He was a really nice guy. Yeah. But he always used to say, you know, cops are very special people. It takes a special type of person to be like a successful and good cop. And I think that's so true. You know, I can't say that was me. I think I did an okay job. I think the guys I work with would say that, but I didn't do a whole career. You know, I did not last the whole career. I didn't have the fire for it enough to stay and keep doing it. I still have so much respect for it and I love it. And I think it's so great, but you really do have to be a special person to do the job. And I would try to research that about yourself as much as possible. As much as that's possible, not actually, you know, throwing the badge on and doing the job first. It's kind of hard. Some places they have reserve programs, like smaller towns in the Northeast and other parts of the country. You can actually go to an intermittent academy. You can become a reserve officer in a short amount of time, and you can actually get some on-the-job stuff going on. So if you already have a career, you're doing something else, I'd say do that. Go to night school or go to school on the weekends, become an actual reserve cop and do the job for a little bit before you put all your eggs in that basket. Because I will tell you, I've received more than one email from cops in their mid-20s saying, Steve, I made a big mistake. Do you think it's a total, is it a total puss out for me to quit? Or wow, what would you do for a job now if you were me? And answering those emails is so difficult because I know exactly how they feel. And my hat's off to them because good for you. You recognize that this isn't for you. And if it's not for you, stop doing it because it's an extremely important and it's needed. The right people need to be there. So definitely don't keep doing it if you can. But yeah, I've gotten a lot of those emails and they break my heart. And I try to respond with as much as upbeat as possible because, you know, when you're in your mid-20s and you realize it's not for you, it does feel a bit from these emails I've gotten like the world's ending. You've put your college education, you put all this time in the police academy, all the background BS they put you through. And now you're like 2 years in, you're like, geez, I'm having panic attacks. I can't do this. The hell am I going to do with my life? Try to avoid that situation. That is a very long, convoluted answer, Ken. I apologize, but I just have a lot of different thoughts and emotions on it, and that's the best I could answer.
No, that's a good answer. I mean, both of us have been contacted by people who listen to the podcast, and they want to know. They listen to this podcast a lot of times. People want to hear about what the job's about, and there are people that are candidates, they're applicants that want to be police officers, and they listen to the podcast to see what's up. And one of the things about your podcast is that I've heard many times is that people appreciate the honesty, the rawness of the interviews. And to sugarcoat it would be a disservice to anybody that wants to be a police officer. And it's like you said earlier in this interview, that badge is coveted. It doesn't matter what department it's from. That badge is a coveted part of you. It becomes a part of you. You're no longer I can remember my badge number. That's my badge number. That's a part of me. And it's not something that you're just not going to fill out an application and they're going to give you this badge. You have to earn it. And so if it takes that much blood and guts from you to get it, and to know that same badge that you're wearing, men and women have died wearing those badges. And so it's a very sober thing that, for you, all the stuff that you said is right on. If you want to be a police officer, it's the real deal, man. It's not, and you may die.
Yeah.
And there's no shame if it's not for you. There's no shame.
No, not at all.
Anybody that's been a cop will go, cool. You know what? You tried it, and it wasn't for you. That's fine.
Absolutely. At least totally you were brave enough, righteous enough to try the profession. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you get a year in and you go, whew, this sucks. It's ruining my life. Bail. No big deal. Yeah. It's just a job.
And the people that actually got those people who are listening that have called you and said, hey, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. They actually made it on the job. For every 10,000 applicants, one of them graduates from the academy. You made it, man. You got the badge, and there's thousands of people who can't because they didn't make it. And so good on them for contacting you with that. Hey, this time has flown by, man.
Yeah, this is a good time.
Yeah, almost an hour and a half here talking to Steve Gould. And hey, man, I want to thank you for coming on the podcast.
My
I hope
pleasure.
You come back.
I will, absolutely. I had a blast.
And so that's all I have as far as this interview goes. But what a great interview with the great Steve Gould. Appreciate you giving me the opportunity to take over the reins and trust me with your baby here with the podcast. And I appreciate that.
It was a good time, Ken. Thank you so much. I was a little nervous. I'm not going to lie to you. I was like, geez, I'm going to be in the hot seat. But I had a really good time. You're of course an excellent interviewer, so I was in good hands. Yeah, this was fun.
Yeah. Do you have an outro for us?
I do. I could outro us right now. If you are thinking about becoming a police officer and you would like to get some consultation, I know only one man I would call, Ken Roybal of policebackground.net. You can get there at policebackground.net, or you can go to thingspolicec.com. Scroll down the bottom. Ken's email is there, and also a link to his site. And he'll tell you straight up if you should do it or not. He'll just say nope and hang right up on you.
True that. Thank you, Steve.
All right, brother. Thank you.